All right, so in this chapter, we're going to create the puddle material. We're going to use the base of our wall material and swap out a few things to paint a puddle in the water as opposed to, something over concrete or brick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my material blend brick concrete and we're going to duplicate this and modify it. Okay. So let's close this out. I'm going to hit Control D. I'm sorry, I'm going to hit Control W to duplicate. And we're going to call this Material Blend Concrete Water. Let's double click it to open it up. So what we're going to do is basically swap out some of these things. Okay, we're not necessarily swapping out textures. If we were just going to do that, we would be able to use our master from before, but we're going to change some of the functionality of this. So to start, let's load in our concrete or our floor textures. So I'm going to path to this material and we're going to grab the color, the normal, and the roughness, and we're going to drag those in. Then I'm going to go click on the mesh and then click on the magnifying glass and go back to this material folder. We also want to get, I believe, our displacement. So let me go back. Let me take a look at the displacement, roughness. Okay, we're gonna do something with our displacement, but not yet. We'll save that from a little bit further down the line. Okay, so let's go back to this material, and we've got these new materials here, and I'm gonna swap the base with our original base, which is our brick. So let's swap out the color, and I'll delete the brick. Let's bring this down and we will swap out the brick roughness with the concrete roughness. And finally, the brick normal with the concrete normal. Okay, so nothing should really change because our base is hidden by our top layer here. So now we need to come through and modify the top layer, okay, or the water. So for water, I don't really have a color for water, but if you imagine when you pour water on a sidewalk or concrete or the floor, what happens to the color of that floor? It typically gets darker. Well, it most always gets darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the base color and we're going to multiply it. I'll hold down the M key and left click to get a multiply. And then I'm going to hold the 3 key and left click to get what's called a constant 3. And this constant 3 is like a color picker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the pixels of our base texture by some value, and then we're going to replace that with the B input. Okay, so I'm going to right click on this and start previewing the node, and that will allow me to preview it over here. So right now what I'm doing is I'm multiplying all these pixels values by 0. When you multiply anything by 0, you get 0. So let's bring it up to white, and when you multiply anything by white or by 1, you get the original value. Let me go into unlit mode just so we aren't confused there by any of the lighting. So here it is. So as I change this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this to like a blue. And then you'll see that we get this kind of blue value. I'll bring down the saturation so it's not like pure blue. So you'll see that we start to tint those pixels from the base color. So I'm just going to pick like some kind of bluish, greenish, aqua-ish. I'll go a little dark with it and just have a little bit of saturation. So here you can see that the original color, I'll open this up. Let's have it float on top. Wait a minute here. Come on. Let me pull this off here. There we go. So here's the original. Sorry about that. So here's the original color, and now we're just tinting it with this value, and it's going to make it just darker and look more saturated. Okay, because again, when you pour water on concrete or anything, it will get darker. Okay, so that's going to take care of it for the top layer of our blend for water. Next is the roughness. So the roughness controls how rough or how smooth the surface is. This is real simple. Water is incredibly smooth. So I'm going to delete this texture sample. I'm going to hold the 1 key on the keyboard and left click to get a constant 1, which is just a single value. And I'm going to leave 0 in there for the roughness. Let me stop previewing and you'll see when I select our sphere here and we go back to lit, now that I have 0 in the roughness, it's going to be incredibly shiny. Okay, now it's a little bumpy, and that's because of the normal map. So the normal map controls all of the little surface undulation, divots and dents and extrusions and all that we can see here. All of these like recessed or extruded pieces. And water is, again, completely smooth. If you fill up a cup of water, the top of that surface, no matter what the bottom of the surface is, when you fill it with water, water is completely flat. So as far as a normal is concerned, I need a flat normal. Okay, we're seeing some weird stuff right now because we're blending these two normals and I don't have a normal. But to get a flat normal, I'm going to hold the 3 key again to get a constant 3. I'm going to plug this into the B value, and we should get some more broken looking stuff because we have 0 in for the normal map. But I'm going to expand this a little arrow here so we get the R, G, and the B. And in the blue value, I'm going to simply type in 1 to give us a completely flat normal. Okay, so again, if I put this on a cube, you know, we had water on top, it's a full puddle of water, the surface would be completely smooth. Okay, that is almost it. All of the same stuff is going to apply. Our contrast here is going to help that blend. We can invert this. I don't know if we'll want the invert here, but the last piece of the puzzle is the way that we blend this. Right now, that blend was blending with this brick height. Okay, so we're filling in the black areas or the recesses first and moving up through the gray values and lastly to the white values. So this is what's called a height map, where white equals height and black equals depth. So the whitest pixel is the highest pixel and the blackest pixel is the deepest pixel. Okay, so this isn't going to work for our water. We need some type of a brush or an alpha or a height map to paint something that looks more organic like a puddle. So what we're going to do is we're going to go grab that concrete displacement. All right, so let's click on this. Let's go. Sorry. I think I'm going to use this texture. So again, these displacement maps, you can think of them as kind of calibrated a bit differently. We're not able to see kind of a lot of the information in here. If I can't really. Let's just bring this into Photoshop and see what we can get. So let's export this. So right click, Asset Actions, Export. Okay, we'll export that to our desktop. Let's launch Photoshop. And let's load this in. So this is an HDR texture, but what we want is we want to target the channels and come into the red here. And I'm gonna hit Control A, Control C, and I'm gonna just do File New. It should be the same size as the texture we're grabbing from, which is 2K. I want to make sure my resolution's at 72. I'm at pixels per inch. I'm going to change this to RGB color. I want to make sure it's 8 bits, and that should be good to go. Now I'm going to come back to my layers, and I'm going to just hit Control-Shift-V to paste. I can double click on this background layer, hit OK, and then drag that to the trash can, and then I'm going to hit Control-L to bring up the levels. Now, doesn't look like there's a lot of information in here, or a lot of information that like I'm looking for. This could work. I'm just gonna bring these black and white points really close together. You see that, well, there is not a lot of information here. We can look at this histogram and we don't have a lot of info. So let's go back and let's try something else. Let's click on our floor here, and we'll path to that material. And I think it was really this image. Yeah, it's this image that I want to use. So let's right click, Asset Actions, Export. We'll export this to the desktop. And back over in Photoshop, let's close both of these out. And let's target the red. Control A, Control C. File New. Or Control N. Make sure I'm on, RGB color, 8 bits. Go to my layer, Control-Shift-V to paste. Double click the background, drag it out. Control-L to pull up the levels. And here we have more of this kind of puddly looking image. So let's get something. Let's try to pull this right to the edge where the white pixels start and the black pixels start. So we've got a good contrast, something like this. Okay, so this would, as we paint in this would paint or fill in the black areas first, then the grays, and then the whites. This is a bit too sharp for a puddle, in my opinion. So we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we are going to start to drag up this radius until we get, I'd say, something around here. In my case, it was the radius was 33.2, but I've got this nice kind of puddly looking image here. So let's save this. And export it. So save as. I'm going to save this as water height I'm going to save it as a targa. We'll hit save, 24 bits per pixel, and then we can close Photoshop down. We don't have to save our PSD. Okay, so back here, let's import our texture. And let's drag this into our material. So we've got it here, and we're just going to simply replace it with the brick texture. So I can hold down Control and left click and drag these pins from that texture to this one. And we should be good to go. Okay, so we've swapped out the color, the roughness, and the normal for our water. And we have input a kind of watery, liquidy, puddly, quote unquote, height map. Okay, that's going to drive the height texture input of all of our height lerps. Okay, so let's close this material out. We can hit yes to save. Okay, let that material compile. And then we should be able to grab all of our floors. I'm going to type floor. Let's go into a this is a top-down view here. Let's do top-down. And I'm going to hold Control and Alt to deselect. And I'm going to deselect all of those tiles that were back in the train station. I do want these, so I could go back, or I'll just hold Shift and reselect these. Okay, and then I'm going to go into a side view and deselect the top. So again, Control and Alt. And I'll hit F to frame. And there we go. We've got just our floor textures in the main part. So now what I'll do is I'll swap out all of these materials with this new material. So I'll drag this material on. We'll drop it there. Yep, and what will happen is the floor will be completely wet and saturated. So we can go to our modes, select Mesh Paint. We can go to Paint, and I'll hit Fill. Then I want to hit Swap Colors and hit Fill again. Then I'll hit Swap Colors, and now we can paint that water in. While I've got this selected still, all my floor pieces, I do want to create an instance. Okay, so I assign the master to this. So let's right click, create a material instance, and we'll drag this instance on and replace it. So now when I open up my instance, I've got all my instance parameters, all of those settings that we created. So I've got the contrast and the invert and all that stuff. Okay, so now we can start to paint. So I'm going to bring my size down quite a bit and my strength down a lot. And as I paint, we'll see that we start to fill in based on that height map. Okay, we've got a bit of a fall off here. So if I open up my material instance and I've got this contrast slider, if I bring that contrast all the way up, it's going to get really sharp. As I start to bring that down, It's going to give me a nice kind of fall off to where the puddles look like they're starting to dry up. So I think I've got a good setting here with 0.1 and 0.07 for the size. So I'm just going to start to paint. And I'm going to fill in around this drain. Okay, and let's say we've got some pipes over here. Maybe the leaking is coming from here. I'm gonna bring up my strength a bit. So I'm at 0.1. Let's try like 0.25. There we go. That's a little bit better. It's kind of fast here, but honestly, for what I'm trying to do, it's gonna get the job done. So yeah, let's puddles coming from over here. Maybe there's some other areas here where we've got some some low areas, and we want some more puddles. But really just kind of make this interesting. So let's we'll put some puddles around here. Let's do 0.175, and let's get just get some puddles here. And again, these would kind of dip down into the drain. We can link it to the drain if we like, or we can have it kind of start to dry up as it gets closer to the drain. So if I want to erase, I'll just hold Shift. We can put some more puddles maybe around the edges. Let's put some puddles down here where it's where we've got the watch out. It's slippery, grippy things. And we'll get some more puddles here. I'm going to erase it from over here because it looks, I think, a bit weird with that harsh kind of line from where the from where this mesh is intersected, kind of like we have over here, but it looks okay here because there's just kind of a lot of puddle. Let's kind of fill this whole back area here. Okay. So let's get back into our select mode. And all right, puddle's looking pretty interesting. Couple things. Let's maybe play with the material. So let's double click the instance so we'll get access to those instance parameters. And again, the contrast, I'm going to pull the contrast down quite a bit so we have this nice fall off. Contrast is almost at 0. And the other thing is I want to be able to change the color. So let's double click this to open up the master. And what I'll do is I'll select this color and I'll right click on this and convert this to a parameter. We'll call this water color. Okay, I also could create a parameter for the roughness here, and let's just do that. We'll convert to parameter, call it water roughness. For the water roughness, I want the default value to be 0 and the slider max to be 1. I don't want this to go over the value of 1. Our normal map, we don't need anything there. We could convert these texture inputs to parameters as well and swap these textures out. So let's right click on this. Let me undo that. Right click, convert to parameter. We'll call this base color input. Right click, convert to parameter, base roughness input. And our normal, we don't need anything to do with the normal. Sorry, with the input B, we don't need to do anything. Let's do the same for the input A. So base normal input. Okay, so we'll save that or apply it. And now when we drag this down and go back to our parameter, we've got all these texture inputs. Now they're a little jumbled up here. So let's go in and let's create some groups for this stuff. So I'll select all of my base inputs. Okay. And over here under a group, I'm just going to type in here and we'll call them base texture inputs. Okay, so now when I apply this and go back to my material instance, we should have this base texture inputs group that we can expand and hide. So I'll be able to swap out all of my base color, my base normal, and my base roughness. We've got this global scalar parameters with the contrast and the water roughness. We've got our invert in there and our water color. We could put those into a group as well. So let's go back over here and let's grab our water inputs. Right, we're not going to be able to grab them all because if I grab this one and hold down Control and grab that one, I am still able to edit the group. So let's grab those two because those are the only two where we can't really modify the normal of this. So let's grab these and we'll call them water inputs. Okay, and then the things that we have left are the switch, which is not in a group, and I believe that's it. All of the other parameters, our contrast and our switch. Let's just leave them out of a group. I don't know what to group them as. All right, so now we've got our base texture inputs here. The global parameters are here, the contrast, the invert, and then our water inputs are here. So really the thing that I wanted to do was modify the water color. Okay, so we've got the water color here. I can click on this and we can make it darker. And it's just nice because we can modify this right on the fly, which is super useful for trying to get it nailed the way that we like it. I'll modify the saturation of that. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. I just really want a little hint of blue, more so I just want it to really kind of be darker. And I think that's looking good. Again, we could play with that contrast. I might open up the master here, and for our contrast, we might set it, give it a slider min and a max. When they're both at 0, it just leaves it open. Okay, so now with both of them at 0, I'm able to take this contrast slider and drag it negatively, which would give us the inverse, which I don't know, you wouldn't necessarily need that. And as we drag it up past 1, we do get a little bit of change still up until about 23. But really from 0 to 1 is like where it looks the nicest. So let's go back into here and let's just set up. Let's say default value 0, slider min, let's leave it at 0, slider max to 25. Now, when we save this or apply it, our contrast, I'll reset it to 0, so we've got no contrast. And I can't bring it down below 0. And now when I bring it up to 25, it kind of changes the scale at which that happens, because now we're getting that really hard contrast at about 16. So let me scroll down here to the parent or the master. Let's open that back up. And let's go back and give ourselves some range. So let's say -10 and maybe 100. Let's see how that changes it. Okay, so the contrast, we're back at 0, and I can now drag it down, and it really just snaps really quickly. And the contrast, okay. I don't like this. Let's go back. I'm going to set this to 0 and 1. I just don't like the feeling of that. It really just kind of snaps either on or off. So now at 0 and 1, we should have just a much more controllable, manageable slider. We don't get it as hard of a contrast as we did when it was 0 and 0. That's okay. I don't really ever imagine that we would have it like completely hard like that, and I really like just the way that I'm able to modify this. So I'm going to pick something around here, 0.02, 0.03, something like that. I think gives it a nice look. And yeah, that's going to do it for blending the water with our concrete floor texture.